Welcome back. We all need money, not only to survive, but also to thrive and achieve our life dreams. That's a fact, certainly in our capitalistic world. But how we interact with money, that is what actually determines whether we will be financially healthy and happy. For many people, though, that interaction brings up a lot of negative emotions connected to financial trauma. That's why I'm really pleased to have Dr. Alex Melkumian on as my next guest. Alex is a financial psychologist and founder of Financial Psychology Center in Los Angeles. Hi, Alex. Great to have you on.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So I am really glad that you're here because something I have learned, I've been a personal finance educator for a very long time. And what I have found, Alex, is that a lot of people look at it as numbers or they see it through a business lens. And I have learned that it is our emotions and it's our behaviors towards money that is even more important.
Absolutely, you hit it on the head, and I appreciate you talking about this challenging topic. It's so important and really a delicate topic at that. But we research is that actually 80% of financial decisions are made in emotion, and only 20% in logic. And so, if we're talking about financial trauma today, the word trauma actually means wound in Greek. Financial trauma actually refers to the financial situations that result in an emotional, psychological, and even physical wound that impacts how we show up in the
Mm.
present or how we perceive our future.
So,
And actually, for our discussion, I'd like to make this
yeah,
distinction that there's two types of traumas. One is the big T trauma and the little t trauma.
okay. So, what causes financial trauma?
So I would actually break it back down into big T traumas, which something that we would often think of like job loss, bankruptcy, loss of our home, or even divorce. But the little T traumas are the regular everyday struggles, like covering monthly bills, living in the gig economy, like with unpredictable or intermittent income, or things like growing up in a setting where money was a perpetual stress, source of conflict between your parents.
Dr. Alex, can you address also some of the myths and misconceptions around this? Because I have to imagine that it's not just those who are, like you said, alluded to, in poverty or living paycheck to paycheck. I personally have seen even people who are well off, struggle with money.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. And actually, several things come to mind. One is that trauma events can cause financial trauma.
Hmm.
And like I just mentioned earlier, little t traumas can really accumulate over time and have a profound effect on our mental health and overall emotional well being. We actually call this complex trauma. You just mentioned the other myth is that financial trauma only affects the poor, right? And I can remember I had a client who was making $400,000 a year, sorry, as a commercial real estate broker, but would take advantage of the profits. And that left him humiliated and ashamed every time he had to go back and ask for another advance.
Do you think that a lot of this starts at a young age? Because, I hear that when you think about money personalities and stuff, there's research that shows that it's often developed by the time we're 7 or 8. So does it start there, or can it be just an event that suddenly triggers everything?
Absolutely. And research that I found is that actually our relationship with money starts in utero. So the fact that we are interacting with money since day one is basically a big epiphany for a lot of the clients that we serve at financial psychology. So of course, when we talk about relationship with money, starting with the environment that we grew up in, and if you grew up with in a disadvantaged or impoverished environment, it absolutely causes financial and things like financial infidelity and financial enmeshment.
We only have about 20 seconds to the break. Is there anything sort of one trigger? Like, is it parents or something that they've heard or said that triggers that?
Absolutely, I would say that a lot of us do things exactly like our parents,
Mm.
or our parents set a bad enough example that we do things the opposite from our parents.
Welcome back. We've been talking about financial trauma. Dr. Alex, are you seeing more of it in the current environment?
Absolutely, and I can bring in some anecdotal examples, but I'd like to kind of throw out some stats. According to the Census Bureau, actually, child poverty risen or more than doubled in 2022. And the other staggering stat is that overall poverty rates have also risen to about 5% in 2022. And it may not sound like a big number,
Mm.
but it actually means that 15 million people in the past year.
That's a lot. And I know we're talking about the US, but we're seeing very
Yeah,
similar situations here
yeah,
because of inflation, right?
absolutely.
And we haven't seen necessarily wages keep up with
The
the rising expenses. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so for those who might think that they're dealing with financial trauma, what's the first step? How do they start dealing with it?
Well, of course, I'm so happy to talk about but of course, the first step in dealing with trauma, or actually even before we can get to the numbers or the planning, we have to address the emotional wounds and sort of reset the thermostat. And this is the hardest part. Realizing and acknowledging the trauma is vital. And I would say I would give you three steps actually. So the first one is becoming aware of being in a trauma response, which is that fight, flight, or freeze response.
Mm.
And evokes a response where if you're in your flight or your fight, you're going to sort of act impulsively and really maybe avoid certain situations, overthink certain situations, and that's in that specific pattern is crucial. The second one would be being mindful to turn a reaction into a response, and of course, it's related to the first step. But creating that pause really reduces the impulsivity and really kind of halts the amygdala hijack, which is a term for our emotional part of the brain overtaking the practical part of the brain. And the last one I would say is the tolerate difficult emotions. And as one of my favorite psychologists, Dr. Susan David, a Harvard psychologist, always says that identifying emotions is a superpower. So being able to really say, "Hey, I'm petrified. I'm in despair. I don't know what to do." It really opens the door for recovery and for being able to deal with financial trauma.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you've mentioned the 3 points. And, I always say there's a lot of shame and stigma around it, and that we have to start erasing it because we won't take those steps. What about the role? I want to get your thoughts on the role of financial education. What role does it play? And maybe just what type is needed?
Yeah, absolutely, a great question, and I think we kind of talked about in the beginning of our interview that
Mm.
80% of financial decisions are made in emotion and only 20. So, all right, I mean, let's think about this role of financial education. It's not about just crunching the numbers, but it's really about blending, the emotional intelligence in our awareness of where we are in our financial journey. And I would say that. mm, Really being able to know what are we doing with our financial lives. We've got to understand our emotions around how we're dealing with money, so we can learn how to. And it's this combination of knowledge and emotion and insight that really helps us to stand strong against financial ups and downs.
Dr. Alex, we only have 30 seconds till the end of the show. If you have a message for the financial industry, because they typically tend to go,
Mhm.
straight to the solution or products, what would you
Yeah.
say?
I would say to embrace the financial planning strategy from a holistic or whole person perspective.
Yeah,
And it's not just about drawing the perfect. We need to understand the emotions, the traumas, and the life stories that each person and client brings to the table. And by
okay.
digging deeper, we truly see a whole person and individual behind it.
Couldn't agree more. Dr. Alex, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Alex Makumian.